Well, look at that. It is 8:30 on the west coast of the United States. It is 0330 GMT. That I give that time just so you're able to do a little bit of math and determine exactly when I'm live in your time zone. Talking all about the legalization of pot, the latest news updates regarding same, the decriminalization where it's illegal, the legalization of medical marijuana for legitimate medicinal purposes, the latest science behind it, and of course the places and the folks that are working on recreational marijuana. Thank you for being here. A lot of news to cover. A special topic I wanted to do tonight. I got to thinking, we cover a lot of the 50 states, the work being done on legalizing recreational weed. In some places, this District of Columbia, the states of Washington, Colorado, I believe also Oregon, other places. The states where medicinal marijuana is legal, and that's a far larger list. And the places where they're maybe not working on legalizing it, but they are working on reducing the penalties and making sure cops are aware. The cops that maybe are not aware, they're making sure those cops are aware of exactly which fish are to be fried in which frying pan, which drug is really the most important to fight, and which ones probably are not as dangerous, either from a direct point of view, as far as using the drug killing you, or a secondary effect point of view, like driving while intoxicated on the substance versus, say, driving while intoxicated on, let's say, meth, let's say alcohol, let's say whatever you want to say. I got to thinking about, what about worldwide? We hear a lot about legalization in the United States, but there are got to be other places in the United States where this discussion is being had, where people are considering that there are other drugs worth considering in a police standard, in a police way, much more seriously than marijuana. So we're going to look at that, look at the countries around the world where they may see legalization in one form or another sometime soon. A number of news stories regarding the legal status of pot in various states around the country, and a little bit of science as well. Let's start with the 10 countries that may see pot legalization soon. I found two articles, one of them from today, regarding what exactly is going on with the legality of cannabis by country. That's the Wikipedia article, which we'll glance at briefly. The legality of cannabis varies from country to country. Some states in the U.S. allow medical cannabis. Here we go. Argentina, possession is illegal but decriminalized. Cultivation is illegal but decriminalized. It is in Argentina legal for personal use in small amounts or consumption in private locations. In Australia, it has been decriminalized in some states. One or two plants may be grown privately for personal use in certain areas. You can basically see the list here. It's a good place to start. I don't like Wikipedia to be the final source of information on anything. You always got to at least back up what they say, because Wikipedia, as we know, is our kind of, it's the people's encyclopedia. When I say it's the people's encyclopedia, I mean that any people can change it. What is this one where it's yellow across the board? Germany. Fantastic. Interesting, though. The possession is illegal, while consumption itself is legal on the basis of it being considered self-harm, which is not considered a crime in Germany. It's the only one of these states where, going down this list, you see all four bars. Well, okay, Czech Republic also. Possession of up to 15 grams for personal use or cultivation of up to 5 plants is merely a misdemeanor. A popular destination for pot smokers, the Czech Republic. Germany, all four yellow. India. Used during the observance of certain Hindu rituals. I did not know that. It's legal and or tolerated for personal use in a small quantity in many places in India. In Jamaica, up to 5 plants of cultivation is illegal. It's the only green box I've seen so far. That's because this is new. On the 25th of February this year, the Jamaican House of Representatives passed a law decriminalizing possession of up to 2 ounces of cannabis. The new law includes provisions legalizing the cultivation for personal use of up to 5 plants. In the Netherlands, we know North Korea. What about this being a bit of a strange outlier as far as the information we're seeing or expected to see. North Korea, although several drugs are illegal in North Korea, cannabis is not one of them. What is number 95 here? Let's just see. When it comes to marijuana, North Korea has a liberal policy of tolerance. Well, let's just look at that article from the folks at the Huffington Post as of October 2013. I did not know this. Marijuana in North Korea is not treated as a drug. Now, could it be because the regime there is so iron-fisted that you can't even find it? Like, is it impossible to find? I mean, according to multiple reports from defectors, visitors, and experts, North Korea either has no law against the sale and consumption of weed, or it has a law that is largely unenforced. A 29-year-old freelance writer from England wrote his account on his blog explaining how he purchased a grocery bag full of weed at an indoor market in rural North Korea and smoked it with impunity both at outdoor parks and monuments as well as in restaurants and bars. The writer, who lives in Bulgaria, also described how the group's regime-appointed minder smoked the marijuana with him and his fellow tourists. The guide said it's legal. Of course, just because a group of tourists does it doesn't mean it's legal for North Korean citizens to, but other reports seem to substantiate the notion that pot in the Hermit Kingdom is not criminalized or even frowned upon. A 2010 report by Open Radio for North Korea, an American NGO based in Seoul, South Korea, cited an anonymous North Korean source as saying Kim Jong-un's regime does not consider marijuana to be a drug. Doesn't that blow your mind? I mean, again, of all the iron-fisted regimes of one degree or another, this is the last place where I would have predicted marijuana is okay. It is unknown whether the drug is technically outlawed, according to experts, but in practice, the regime does not appear to take issue with it. It grows wildly in North Korea and has even been sold abroad by government agencies as a way to earn foreign currency. Not clear what the official law on the books states, but in any case, marijuana, which is known as yoksam in North Korea, is not prioritized by the government and is therefore not treated as an illegal drug. I find that just astounding. It should be noted little is known about marijuana-related prosecutions, if any. Of course, in the last year alone, this is from 2013, and I don't think it's changed a whole lot, police in the U.S. made a marijuana-related arrest every 42 seconds in a year, according to U.S. News and World Report, and also spends about $3.6 billion a year enforcing marijuana law. Now, the problem with that, as I see, is not that a country doesn't appear to have it on the rule books at all as far as illegality. I feel like one problem is that the anti-legalization people are going to say, we don't want the U.S. to be like North Korea, do you? That's sort of a backward, contorted argument, but I can see people on that side not caring about contorting their argument or not, and going ahead and saying stuff like, you don't want to be like North Korea, do you? But I do find that utterly fascinating, and I literally discovered it live on the air here, having not really known about this before. I just find it utterly bizarre and fascinating. I did not know marijuana is not illegal in North Korea. Just fascinating. All right. Pakistan, it's illegal but mostly tolerated. Norway, illegal across the board. Peru, everything is illegal but decriminalized unless you're talking about selling pot in Peru. Selling pot is the one red box in Peru. Where'd Peru go? I guess I missed it here. Portugal, again, illegal to sell but decriminalized everything else. Puerto Rico, legal for medical use only. Russia, it's illegal to sell it, but seeds contain no controlled substances and are not regulated. As a matter of fact, possession, cultivation, or even use of any quantity of marijuana is heavily prosecuted. So interesting. Even though it says it's decriminalized for up to 6 grams here, it still seems to say, again, it's Wikipedia. There may well be very incorrect information or conflicting information, but it's worth looking at. Of course, the United States has all kinds of weirdness. Uruguay, another country where it's pretty fascinating. Fully legalized the use of cannabis in Uruguay. Jose Mujica as long as it's for a personal amount. Uruguayan politician, president of Uruguay. He's been described as the world's humblest president due to his austere lifestyle and donation of around 90% of his monthly salary to charities that benefit poor people. You got to respect that, aside from his apparent take on marijuana. Well, heck, that's not what I was hoping would happen. Okay, anyway, moving right along. This is what I wanted to do. And look at Uzbekistan, illegal, Ukraine, illegal, U.S. Virgin Islands, illegal, but decriminalized. Okay, well, pretty fascinating. A long list of very interesting sources here to turn to as well. And again, the more we look through this list, the more it's interesting to note where the green boxes are, where the yellow boxes are. For instance, cannabis cultivation is not illegal for cannabis growers growing cannabis with less than 0.2% THC. Okay. There was a proposal of 2012 that would decriminalize medical cannabis. This is in the country of Slovenia. It failed with not enough support. The petition for support for medical marijuana decriminalization was reproposed in 2013. It succeeded in gaining enough public support for legal cannabis, but the Slovenian government rather reclassified cannabis from Class B to Class A, designated fines for small quantity possession. Possession is misspelled here. Again, this is not a perfect site to be using. Looks like Slovakia may see some changes. Let's look at Poland briefly. The law introduces the possibility that when a person has negligible amounts of drugs for personal use and is not a dealer, there may be terminating the prosecution of such. The legalization raised the maximum penalty, I should say, for placing a large number of drugs from 10 to 12 years in prison. However, possession of large quantities would result in up to 10 years. Again, I'm not fully appreciating what that says, but of all of the countries to be green across the board, North Korea is a weird and definite outlier as far as that stuff goes. Meanwhile, this is a website called cheatsheet.com, not necessarily a major source, but it does appear to be a blog of some repute, I suppose you could say. In the same way, legislators across America are keeping their eyes on Washington and Colorado. By the way, the date on this story, May 20th, so yesterday. The experiments of legalization that are playing out in certain states are not only going to be of importance for the legalization in the rest of the country, but likely in other countries as well. Many people have known for years there are certain places around the world that are known for marijuana tourism, like Amsterdam, but are those individual locations actually helping press the issue on a larger scale? The truth is there's a lot happening both domestically and abroad. Just as many U.S. states are actively in the process of legalizing or already have, so are many countries across Europe and South America. So who's already done it and who's on the precipice? Obviously, there are advantages and drawbacks to legislation. Each country has its own ways of handling sweeping change. But when it comes to marijuana legalization, it appears many countries might signal the green light in the near future. Read on to see 10 countries in no particular order. Number 1, Czech Republic. Located in Central Europe, it is still getting a grasp on its newly minted medical marijuana law, which was passed in early 2013. Many people are still having a hard time finding the medicine, if they're medicinal users, to help cope with their needs, but it seems that situation's improving. There's also widespread decriminalization, in which Czech citizens are allowed to grow up to 5 plants or be in possession of certain amounts of cannabis without the fear of being prosecuted criminally. Czech drug policy has been undergoing rapid change over the past few years, and it shouldn't be a surprise if full legalization is pushed through or at least considered in the near future. After all, Prague isn't earning the title of New Amsterdam for nothing. Okay, and again we see, it looks like a drug bust picture there. That must be in Czechoslovakia, I suppose. I say must. I don't know why I say must. Okay, country 2, Ecuador, which shares a continent with the only country on earth to have fully legalized cannabis, in Uruguay, may be on its way to legalizing pot itself. This country has a long and rich history filled with issues resulting from the international drug trade and the subsequent war on drugs. Currently, possession of small amounts of cannabis is permitted if it's for personal use and there is no intent to distribute. So you can have it, you can use it, you just can't sell it. However, the Ecuadorian government could be poised to earn big bucks on the Press Your Luck game show by legalizing in terms of tax dollars and potential trade revenue. The president has already issued a large number of pardons to drug offenders, possibly giving a glimpse into a more relaxed attitude toward controlled substances. That suggests it's not just marijuana, but actually other possible substances as well. Interesting. Okay, Jamaica. I don't like pictures like this. I don't think it's amusing to have a joint that's larger than people. You know, I don't see the size of the joint being, smoking the biggest joint possible, or like a cross-shaped joint where it's 3 joints all attached. I don't think any of that's interesting or funny. Back to the article here. Though many people may have thought marijuana was already legal in the Caribbean island nation of Jamaica, that's not the case. However, it does look like the country's leadership is leaning toward going that route. Just recently, the country took a big step in relaxing its laws on possession and also decriminalized it for a variety of reasons, including religious ceremonies and medicinal use. Jamaica may be swayed in coming years by increasing pressure from its in-house Rastafarian movement, as well as tourists from places like the U.S., where legalization is quickly sweeping the country. All right, Mexico. Now, here's a country I know a little something about. I won't claim to know a lot, but I did live there for a year. Where I lived was not any of the areas where we see drug violence, cartel violence, that sort of thing. Where I lived was way down in the southeastern portion of Mexico, which is essentially the Yucatan jungle, the peninsula there. I was an English teacher, but I did get the chance to observe, and many of my students were not from Mexico. Many of my students were from Colombia or other countries. I had a couple of people who were French students, but many people who were Mexican, students from Mexico grew up there. They're from that country. Go figure. You go to a country, meet people from that country. And I will say this, sort of attached or tangent to what that article said a moment ago. In another country, and I assume we'll see it in the Mexico article, which we will continue to read in a second here, because of the violence of cartels, many Mexicans, people who live in Mexico, feel a sort of very basic anti-pot sentiment. Just because of the violence that gets a lot of, media play, frankly, and because of that, it's probably a bit overblown, just like the violence we see in Mexico in the media in this country. It's overblown and it's restricted to certain areas. It's sort of like, I basically moved to the equivalent of Iowa as far as drug violence is concerned in the U.S. Drug violence in California, drug violence in New York, drug violence in Florida, and then drug violence in Iowa. There's not going to be a comparison in those 3 states compared to Iowa. While the populations may have been different and so forth, many things were different compared to Iowa and the state of Tabasco, where I lived for most of the year I was there. But I will say this, the violence was not there. Even the U.S. State Department couldn't find even its most kind of overblown excuse to not recommend travel to Mexico in the state where I lived. So it's sort of, it's hard to say the country of Mexico when there's all these different states, just like it's hard to say the nation of the United States when they feel differently about it in Texas than they feel about it in California or Colorado or Washington. So it's hard to paint any one country with a single brush. But when you talk about Mexico, I think if there's a overwhelming or a majority opinion that pot is bad, it's because of the rather intense cartel violence. Again, even if it's overblown by the media, there is such violence, and it is in certain areas, and certain people's lives are affected by it in certain ways. And so in perhaps ways that we don't see in the United States. And I think it's fair to sort of give them a pass in a place where I wouldn't normally give a group of people a pass on being against weed. The arguments against weed, as I've covered in the show recently, are pretty specious in the extreme. One of the arguments against weed you cannot argue with to a certain degree is a person whose family was touched by drug cartel violence, because they've lost their loved ones, and that's all there is as far as they're concerned. And you kind of got to give people like that a pass, I feel like, to a certain degree, even if it means suspending logic and reason, because they had a loss that I will not experience in my lifetime over a substance or over a topic or a philosophical debate that frankly loses all relevance in a theoretical standpoint, because all of a sudden we're talking about boots on the ground, real life consequences of the marijuana issue, meaning somebody they love died. So while it's easy to be a United States American and say things like, oh, we're more civilized in this country because we are starting to, decriminalize pot. We're starting to legalize it for medical reasons. We're starting to legalize it for recreational reasons. All that's true and all that's fine and agreeable. But not even on the books is illegal in North Korea. Nobody seems to care. That blows my mind to this day, to this minute. It's been 10 minutes since I learned that. I'm still astounded. But, also we don't have the violence that Mexico has in that high profile way. We don't have 24 decapitated heads dumped in the middle of an intersection anywhere in this country. We have a biker rally where 9 people get shot and killed and hundreds others get arrested, and we call that violence. Go to Sinaloa, go to Michoacan, go to Sonora, these states in Mexico where that's actually much more serious of a situation. Now, if you do want to stay philosophical and argumentative and debate theoretically these things, you could say that, well, were the cartels not able to sell marijuana in a legal way because it was legalized everywhere, and that violence would abate? And no doubt that's probably true. But again, it's hard to be purely philosophical when you've had a family member or multiple family members die, especially if they were innocent. If they were involved in the cartel in some way and they died, maybe you could argue, okay, they might have had a certain degree of that coming to them. They might have known it was the dangerous thing to be into in the first place. But if they're purely innocent people, and sometimes innocent people do get caught up in the cartel violence, then it's a little harder to blame those people for being against pot. It really is. And so there's a sliding scale here, and it's not a sound 100% airtight argument as far as that sort of thing goes. All right, let's read what this article has to say about Mexico. That was my little diatribe about marijuana and Mexico and sort of giving them a pass. One way to help cut down on the illegal drug trade and the power of drug cartels as a result would be for the nation of Mexico to give its prohibition laws a second look. There's been plenty of talk over the past several years about it, but political pressure from the U.S. government has helped to keep those laws on the books for now. The power of criminal organizations, including the infamous cartels that operate along the border, has been shown to be weakening. As a result of decriminalization, we reported on that here as well. Mexican leaders may be swayed to vote for legalization if it means a lessening of violence and corruption. So perhaps what I just said is partially true and partially wrong in one way and in another way. As I say, it's hard to be philosophical when people see the violence on a daily basis, especially if there's an innocent person they know and love who was killed. Seems like Mexican leaders may be swayed to vote for legalization if it means decreasing corruption and violence. And one of these stories we covered very, very extensively here was that certain Mexican cartels are losing money and perhaps even going to be planning to get out of the pot business because it's legal to grow and obtain here in some places, and the revenue generation of it is lessening to a degree. Now, one problem with that, one sort of unintended consequence would be they're going to switch to meth. And meth, we know, is really damaging in a neurological sense. It's damaging in a relationship, psychological sense. It's just, there's nothing good about meth. It's just, frankly, there are, I think, a certain subgroup of people who use meth who kind of consider themselves like the good meth users, right? It's just smoking dope. They sort of treat it in the way pot heads treated pot in the 60s when it was universally illegal, in the 70s. And they seem to think that medical meth will be a thing one day or something like that. And I think most of us know that's obviously never going to be the case. Um, and I think most people who see these things clearly for what they are, keep aware of the news on these topics, are aware that meth is damaging. Meth does make people act in a very violent way. Meth does destroy brain cells in a very serious way. And in as much as there's almost nothing to hate about the substance marijuana when you look at it scientifically, there's almost nothing to love or like even when it comes to meth. When it helps you lose weight, go for a walk once in a while, and you'll lose weight, and it'll be a lot less damaging overall. Okay. Mexico is country number 4. Country number 5, Canada. From America's the southern border to its northern one, Canadians have been able to enjoy relatively more lax marijuana laws compared to the U.S. Places like British Columbia are famous worldwide for supposedly growing some of the finest marijuana in the world. There's an article we should come back to. It's one of the major sources of the plant into the United States. I was not aware of that. There are a majority of Canadian citizens who want to see the plant legalized, and much of what policymakers decide to do will likely come as a result of how the U.S. handles legalization going forward. So that is fascinating. Let's look briefly at this Huffington Post article from 3 years ago. Vansterdam tours are gaining popularity in Vancouver. It's the Amsterdam of North America, a mecca of cannabis culture. I did not know that, but that's fascinating to me. The pungent scent of marijuana drifts, blah, blah, blah. Cannabis Culture Magazine, the BC Marijuana Party, overgrowing the government is their motto. That's kind of amusing. The Herb Museum they have. This is a very interesting, it's a couple of years old. I don't like to cover old articles on this show, but this is pretty interesting one, and perhaps a snapshot in time as far as what Canada is like, has been like, will be like in the near future. Nor do tourism officials want the city to cash in on cannabis culture. This is not something Vancouver's tourism industry promotes, they say. So fascinating. In Spain, certain places in Spain have also been called the New Amsterdam due to their high concentration of private cannabis clubs. Operating in somewhat gray area within Spanish law, these clubs take advantage of new laws that have decriminalized possession, although the manufacture and sale of cannabis is still illegal. It appears that Spain is one of the countries that will ride the momentum of the legalization movement and makes more policy moves based on what happens as a result of decriminalization. So again, the pioneering aspect of the United States is looking at this through clear eyes, perhaps for the first time, is going to be pretty widespread and pretty profound. How we handle it in a financial sense, how we handle it in a legal sense, how we handle the people who abuse the system, how we handle the people who go around the system. We talked in the last program about the black market that still exists in Colorado, and how, frankly, it's so heavily legislated and so heavily, regulated is the word, that they actually find it just to be easier to go about it the old-fashioned way. And use the black market. You wouldn't think the black market would still exist in a place where it's recreational, but in comes the government to regulate things, and certain people object to that and will put themselves at risk depending on how much they object to those laws and what's going on. Company number 7. By the way, this is 420 Legalization Nation. Send me a tweet at this address. You can send me a email or a comment on this very video in case you happen to be watching and it's not live. If the time is not currently almost 9 o'clock p.m. Pacific time on the 21st of May or 0400 GMT on the first, I guess that would be on the 22nd of May, then you're watching this on tape, please do comment, please do participate. This is not just meant to be a monologue, this is meant to be sort of a dialogue, and I do respond to all comments, and I do respond to all tweets and questions, which, by the way, we have to do coming up in the program, so do stay with us for that, coming up toward the end here. In the last 15, 20 minutes of the show, I try to make the show between 45 and 50 minutes long per edition, and I try to make sure it's as journalistic as possible. Again, from cheatsheet.com, we're covering the 10 countries that have or will see marijuana legalized. Uruguay, of course, has made a name for itself by becoming the first and only country on earth to fully legalize marijuana. The laws themselves are still being ironed out, but Uruguay has taken an enormous leap by being the first country to put a legal marijuana market into place on a nationwide scale. The market itself will be tightly regulated on all fronts by the government. The prices are estimated to be incredibly cheap compared to Colorado and Washington in this country. For comparison, a gram of legal marijuana in either of those states can cost from $10 to $30 cheaper through the medical market, where some estimates put Uruguayan marijuana at just 87 cents per gram. Can that be? It says 87 center per gram. I'm hoping that's just a typo. Let's look at the CNN article here regarding Uruguay just for a second. This from May of last year. This is about a year old now. From the folks at CNN. It does not appear to be loading, so perhaps we'll have to come back to that. The Netherlands, everybody knows Netherlands and Amsterdam, the prime destination for many years of marijuana tourists. The city's infamous coffee shops have attracted visitors from all over, seeking to partake in the marijuana trade in the land of the Dutch folk. Of course, there have been some bumps in the road, especially recently, in which the law has actually been changed to make it harder to track down cannabis. It's unclear how things will turn out moving forward, but for a country with a reputation and history of friendly attitudes towards pot, it's not hard to imagine the Dutch government would pass less restrictive legislation if their neighbors and other world powers do. So there is that. Argentina. Now, before we go to Argentina, let's go back to the Uruguay article on CNN here. Legal marijuana market in Uruguay. Let's just watch this news story, shall we? Just for 2 minutes. It seems rather short. Again, the CNN website appears to be
you see me and it's
slow, and I don't want to watch the ad, but can you imagine legally growing marijuana in your backyard? How about walking down to the corner pharmacy to buy a gram or two of ready-to-smoke pot? Starting Tuesday, it's no longer just a theory or a fantasy in Uruguay. Let's look at it.
For this group of young people in Uruguay, celebrating means smoking marijuana in public. It's been nearly 5 months since Uruguay became the first country in the world to legalize marijuana, and Uruguayan officials have finally released the rules for its production, distribution, and sale. The value of the gram of marijuana sold at pharmacies in the regulated market will be set by the President's office through its marijuana control agency. You heard right. The Uruguayan government created an agency that will regulate the marijuana market. The rules say people can grow as many as 6 plants at home and produce a maximum of 480 grams per year. Cannabis clubs of anywhere between 15 and 45 members will be legal.
We will take care of the tool of this law to demonstrate that we as the public can objectively look at this project and comply with its proposed legality.
People will be able to buy as much as 40 grams of marijuana per month at state-licensed pharmacies. What we now know is that we had a sustained increase in consumption during Prohibition. This new reality, as we understand it, is going to change that, and it will be possible to implement better public policy to take care of those who abuse drugs. For anyone considering traveling to Uruguay to smoke marijuana legally, President Jose Mujica says, go elsewhere. The law doesn't give foreigners the right to smoke or even buy the drug. In fact, consumers, sellers, and distributors all have to be licensed by the government. The price of marijuana will also be regulated by the state. Officials say the proposed price starts at 20 Uruguayan pesos per gram, a little less than $1 US.
Wow,
Rafael
okay.
Romo, CNN Atlanta.
So there that is.
Some cashback
Thank
cards
you.
make things
We
so
don't want
complicated.
the ad, and I don't want to see the ad. But I do think that's really fascinating. Not only fascinating from a solid legalization standpoint, which it is fascinating, a country completely legalizing it from stem to stern, but also tourists not really allowed. You got to be Uruguayan. You got to be licensed, even if you're going to be a user. Interesting, fascinating, actually, because a lot of the places like Colorado, like the Netherlands, do see and probably learn to appreciate in some way, in some magnitude, the tourism aspect of marijuana. And I know you're seeing that in Colorado. I know they're seeing it in the state of Washington. And I feel like in the nation of Uruguay, I'm a little bit surprised to hear them so strong about it. Again, that may relax as they find that it's not turning out to be a problem. But as time goes on, I still think that's a very fascinating asterisk. It's almost as fascinating as finding out that it's nowhere on the books as far as the laws in North Korea, and people who smoke marijuana publicly in North Korea, at least certain tourists who have blogged about it, seem to have had absolutely zero problem and have gotten high with government officials and stuff like that. It's two very different sides of the same coin. North Korea, completely illegal, even though it's the most hardcore, government regime we could think of, with the exception of like the ISIS and Taliban folk. And then Uruguay, who seems to have a very, intelligent, modern, sophisticated attitude about it, but not for tourists, only for people who are from that country. So again, just fascinating. Finishing up this article, Uruguay was there. We talked about Argentina. Let's look at nations 9 and 10. 9 was Argentina, 10 is India. This nation may come as a surprise to be seen among the many Western European and South American nations on the list, but Indians are surprisingly open to the possibility of legalizing pot. The Times of India has even gone on record supporting the idea. It's already widely used in religious ceremonies among the Hindu population, and its use is not enforced as stringently as many might suspect. Not only that, but wild cannabis grows in abundance in many parts of India, making it even harder to regulate. So, again, fascinating. I think India has probably a decent and deserved reputation as being fairly intelligent, fairly sophisticated, obviously high population and, a few cities. But at the same time, you don't see a lot of countries in the region there on this list. You see mostly Western European and South American nations, as the folks at cheatsheet.com pointed out. So there are the 10 nations pushing for international marijuana legalization, and a look at those. The other article I sort of did want to look at, we had the 11 countries, and I've lost that article. We'll get to that in another edition. We only have about maybe 10 minutes left on this program. So let's look in the United States here at the various news stories involving legalization and decriminalization of pot. By the way, do tweet me, do call me, 310-776-5867. That's not right. The number I just said is not correct. The number I will put on the screen here, 310-776-5869. You can call if you're here live, or you can call if it's on tape. You can leave a message, or you can send a tweet or a text message to this phone number at any time. You can also send a tweet here, and I will be instantly notified and be able to reply. And please do comment on the video, whether it's live, whether it's on tape. A comment is also something I get instantly notified about, and appreciate your tips as far as news stories go. Your take on it. Are you in a country where it's legal? Are you in a country where they're considering it, depending on how it goes in the United States? Are you in a country that absolutely forbids it and people are arrested for very small amounts of possession-only crimes? It's a very big world. Journalist Paul Harvey used to say, "It is not one world." I think that was pretty profound, even though it is one world in a sense. There is a sense in which it is not one world. And in a nation where we have a country like Uruguay legalizing it completely, but only for people in that country, and a nation like North Korea, I mean, I keep going back to that same point because it just blows my mind so goddamn much. Okay. Back to the United States. Let's look at the news here in this country. The Illinois Senate has passed a marijuana decriminalization bill. This from the Chicago Tribune. They plan changes in it. Low-level cannabis possession would go from being a crime with fines of up to $2,500 and a year in jail to penalties basically like a traffic ticket. Passing a measure Thursday. The date on this is May 21st. This is posted about an hour ago, an hour prior to me beginning this broadcast. Carrying small amounts of pot would result in a fine instead of an arrest. Low-level cannabis possession would go from a crime with fines up to $2,500 to a penalty like a traffic ticket, no court time, a fine of up to $125 for those caught with less than 15 grams, which is the equivalent of about 25 joints, cigarette-sized joints. The Senate voted 37-19 to approve the legislation after it cleared the House last month, but it's not yet going to the Republican governor's desk. Sponsors say they'll hold on to it until additional cleanup language is approved. If signed into law, Illinois would join 17 other states in decriminalizing the possession of small amounts of marijuana, which comes to us from the folks at NORML. Nearly half the country, including Illinois, already allows for medical marijuana. This senator says, while he believes using marijuana is wrong, people shouldn't have their lives ruined because of it. Again, that is sort of the, I think, overriding safe place for a politician to come out and say what they feel. That is, I think using it is wrong. But should you be thrown in jail? Should your life be ruined forever because of it? Should you have a record such that it were the same as though you robbed a bank or killed a person? That you got arrested for pot when you were 19 years old or something like that? Should that stay with you forever? Even if you're against marijuana, I've known very few people who think that it should stay with you forever and ruin your life like that. I do know some who probably would say so. Let's look at other places. This is all about the Illinois situation. We've been covering a lot of states and looking at what they're doing here. The U.S. Senate Committee approves veterans' medical marijuana amendment here. This on the federal level, I believe, and it's pretty fascinating. The United States Senate Appropriations Committee today voted 18 out of 30 for an amendment that would lift the gag order that bars VA doctors from talking at all about medical marijuana with their patients. Okay, so this is what we have. We have a law in place that stops doctors from talking to veterans, American veterans who fought for this country, maybe have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and may find that the treatments for that, certainly the pharmaceutical treatments for that, contain side effects of various magnitudes. They may contain anything up to and including severe side effects in many cases. Again, we talk about the big three: ability to sleep without severe nightmares, the ability to relieve pain, the ability to relieve anxiety. That trifecta is a big trifecta when it comes to people who can be helped with marijuana. And again, you know, you're talking to somebody who hasn't smoked marijuana in many months. The last time I was high was when I was in Denver for New Year's. And of course, I'm going to do it in Denver when it's legal in Colorado and it's New Year's. But at the same time, when you speak of medicinal marijuana, for anybody to be against any medicine that can help someone with some severe medical condition that they have, that's just, I mean, it's inhuman. It's really, really bizarre. We're running out of time, so I'm going to try and wrap this up. But again, the Senate Appropriations Committee passed a bipartisan amendment, finally lifting the ban and letting VA doctors recommend medical marijuana to patients in states where it's legal. It's the first time the U.S. Senate has ever moved marijuana law reform legislation forward. So this from the Weed blog. It was sponsored by a Republican from Montana and a Democrat from Oregon, and it's certain to pass, they say, on the Senate floor. So that's a pretty good place to leave this edition of the program on. Again, Oregon marijuana legalization. Flavor Flav arrested for possession of pot in the past 4 hours. Do we know where? Looks like the Las Vegas Review-Journal is the people reporting that. Yeah, in Vegas. So, okay, well, Flavor Flav. Even if you're Flavor Flav, you can't get away with possessing marijuana illegally if you get stopped for it. Please participate. Please don't let this just be a monologue. Do give me your comments. Do give me your tweets and your calls and your texts. Join me the next time or add me, by the way, if you happen to be on Google Plus and you want additional notification for when I'll be on the air doing this. It's not a regular thing yet, but it is sort of my effort to get a program on 1580 K-High in Colorado Springs. I believe that if I were able to present, say, a journalistic college level approach to marijuana discussions, I believe that would be a nice fit for the other programming they have on 1580 K-High in Colorado Springs. I've been a radio guy for 20 years and a journalist as well, so I feel like I would do well. I would do well in a situation like that. Meantime, do get back to me. Do join me next time for the 420 Legalization Nation. Good night.